The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for millennia, a coalition of the oldest and most powerful alien races who believed they were invincible. Composed of species that had mastered technology and war over eons, they saw themselves as the rightful rulers of the galaxy, and in their arrogance, they saw humanity, young, reckless, and stubborn, as a minor nuisance to be dealt with. It was a mistake. In the Council's Grand Hall, a massive dome suspended in the heart of the galaxy's capital, the decision was made. A towering figure stood at the center, a Psychorak, one of the most ancient species, known for their cold logic and even colder demeanor. High Commander Wethel's voice reverberated through the hall, addressing the counselors seated around him. Earth must be brought to heel, Wethel declared, his dark, chitinous exoskeleton glistening under the harsh lights of the chamber. Their defiance in the face of our authority is an insult. If we do not act now, other lesser species may follow their example. We cannot allow that. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. For years, humanity had expanded its influence beyond its homeworld, spreading across star systems that the council had long considered their domain. The humans had proven themselves resilient, technologically innovative, and alarmingly quick to adapt. And worst of all, they refused to submit to the Council's demands. The Council's arrogance blinded them to what was truly at stake. They viewed humanity as nothing more than a rebellious child that needed to be disciplined. The decision was swift, a show of force. A devastating blow to humanity's colonies in the outer systems would surely break their spirit and force them into submission. Admiral Gureth, a fierce Tarkali with a reputation for his brutality in war, was given the order. His fleet, comprised of the most advanced warships the Council possessed, was sent to wipe out humanity's colonies in the distant Aethera system, a key outpost in humanity's growing influence in that sector of the galaxy. The Council had no intention of negotiating. They believed this strike would be a swift reminder of who controlled the galaxy. But they were wrong. On Earth, the response to the attack was immediate. When the news broke of the Aethera colony's destruction, shockwaves spread across the planet. The images were broadcast on every network, cities reduced to rubble, millions dead in a matter of hours. The people of Earth watched in horror as the proud colony was turned into nothing more than ash. President Eleanor Moore stood in the command center of Earth's United Defense Force, UDF, staring at the holographic display showing the devastation on Aethera. Her fists clenched, and she fought to keep her emotions in check. Around her, the room buzzed with activity. Military officers and advisors hurried to and fro, coordinating rescue operations for the surviving colonists and trying to piece together what had happened. Beside her stood General Marcus Riker, the grizzled commander of Earth's military forces. His face was grim, his jaw set in a hard line. "We knew the Council hated us," Riker said, his voice low. "But this is beyond anything we expected." Moore nodded slowly, her mind racing. "They want to break us," she said. "They think if they hit us hard enough, we'll fold. But they don't know us. We won't submit." Riker glanced at her, a hint of something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "It's time, isn't it?" he asked. The president met his gaze. There was no hesitation. She knew exactly what he meant. It's time. For centuries, humanity had prepared for this moment. In secret, beneath the surface of Earth, and in hidden outposts scattered across the system, a fleet had been built. An armada forged during an era when Earth had feared the day it might have to defend itself from a threat far greater than anything it had ever faced. The ancient fleet was a relic from humanity's golden age of war, created using technology that had been kept hidden from the galaxy at large. Few even knew of its existence. The Council certainly didn't. And now it was the key to humanity's survival. In the heart of Antarctica, beneath a sprawling mountain range, lay the largest of the secret bases, codename Bastion. For centuries, it had remained hidden, a massive underground facility that housed the core of humanity's ancient fleet. The facility had been built at a time when Earth had faced an existential threat from within. But once the danger had passed, the fleet was placed in stasis, awaiting the day it would be needed again. General Riker and President Moore stood at the entrance to the facility, watching as massive doors, thick as a city block and reinforced with an alloy stronger than any known metal, slowly ground open. Behind them stood a contingent of Earth's top military officials, all silent as the enormity of what was about to happen sunk in. The air hummed with energy as the doors fully opened, revealing the enormous underground hangar beyond. It was a breathtaking sight. Rows upon rows of massive warships, their sleek, angular designs a stark contrast to the more modern ships humanity had been using in recent centuries. These were ships built for war on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Each one bristled with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Their hulls were made of a near-indestructible material that could withstand the most powerful energy weapons. And now, they were ready to be unleashed. General Riker turned to the President. "This fleet was built for one purpose," he said, "to defend Earth from any threat. And now, we will make the Council pay for what they've done." President Moore nodded. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "We strike back." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Council was already celebrating their victory. Admiral Gareth and his fleet returned to their homeworld, greeted as heroes for their decisive strike against humanity. The Council believed the humans would be crippled by the loss of their colonies, forced to submit and beg for mercy. But as the Council reveled in their arrogance, their sensors detected an anomaly on the edge of their territory. It was faint at first, easily dismissed as background noise or a passing anomaly. But then it grew stronger, an unmistakable signal. It was the human fleet, and it was headed straight for them. Admiral Gareth sat aboard his flagship, studying the incoming fleet on his tactical display. His initial amusement at the thought of a human retaliation quickly turned to confusion, and then fear. The ships approaching were unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. They were larger, more advanced, and radiated power that sent shivers down the spines of even the most battle-hardened soldiers in Gareth's fleet. "Impossible," Gareth muttered, staring at the data. Where did they get these ships? As the human fleet drew closer, the realization dawned on Gareth and the rest of the Council. They had underestimated humanity. Badly. And now, it was too late. In the depths of space, Captain Aaron Reese stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, the largest and most powerful ship in the ancient fleet. His crew moved with precision and purpose around him, preparing for what was to come. "All systems online, Captain," his XO reported. "The fleet is ready for your command." Reese nodded, his eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The Council's forces were gathering ahead, but they were nothing compared to the power of the fleet under his command. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This fleet, these ships, had been built long before his time, and now it was his responsibility to lead them into battle. "We're going to make them pay for what they did to Athera," Reese said quietly. Then, louder, "All ships, prepare for battle. Engage the Council's forces on my mark." The bridge hummed with anticipation as the countdown began, and in that moment, Captain Reese knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The unleashing of Earth's wrath. The bridge of the Prometheus buzzed with nervous energy as the ancient fleet sailed through the darkness of space, a silent storm poised to strike. Captain Aaron Reese stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the galaxy before him. The Council's forces loomed ahead, massive armadas of sleek, technologically advanced warships arranged in tight formations. They were confident, unaware of the power that humanity had kept hidden for so long. Reese's fingers tapped the edge of the command console as he weighed the gravity of the moment. This was it, the moment Earth's hidden might would be revealed to the galaxy. The moment when the Council would learn the price of underestimating humanity. "Status report," Reese ordered, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "All ships in position. "Sir," Commander Lexitorin replied from her station. She was young, sharp-eyed, and as cool under pressure as any officer in the fleet. "Shields are charged, weapons systems at full capacity. We're ready to strike." Reese nodded. "What's the status of the Council's fleet?" Torrent's hands danced over her console, pulling up the latest data. "The Council's fleet is holding position just outside the Guyana system, sir. Admiral Gareth's flagship, the Sovereign, is positioned at the center. They've formed a defensive perimeter around their primary fleet, but they don't seem to be anticipating an attack of this magnitude." "They think we're bluffing," Reese murmured. "They still don't realize what's coming." He turned to the viewport, where the stars stretched out before him. In the distance, the faint glimmers of the Council's ships could be seen. Tiny specks of light in the vastness of space. Soon, those lights would be engulfed in fire. "Commander Torren," Reese said, his voice firm, "activate the fleet-wide communication channel. It's time to remind the Council of who we are." Torren pressed a button, and moments later, the entire fleet was linked, every ship's crew awaiting their captain's orders. "This is Captain Aaron Reese," Reese began, his voice carrying through the void of space to every soldier under his command. "For centuries, Earth prepared for this day. We built this fleet to defend our home, to protect our people from those who would seek to destroy us. Today, we stand on the precipice of history." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Council thought they could break us by destroying Athera," Reese continued, his tone growing harder. "They thought they could crush our spirit and force us into submission. But they were wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not be broken. Today, we unleash our wrath." Across the fleet, soldiers, pilots, and officers stood straighter, their faces hardening with resolve. They had all seen the devastation wrought on Athera. Many of them had lost family, friends, and loved ones in the attack. Now, they were ready for revenge. "All ships," Reese commanded, "prepare to engage. Target the Council's fleet. On my mark, unleash hell." The final countdown began. Across the fleet, massive warships came to life, their weapons systems humming with lethal energy. Plasma cannons and railguns powered up, targeting systems locked onto the distant Council ships. Fighters and bombers launched from hangar bays, streaking out into the void like a swarm of angry hornets. And then the order came. Fire. On board the Council flagship, the Sovereign, Admiral Gareth watched in stunned disbelief as the human fleet opened fire. His officers scrambled around him, shouting reports and commands, but Gareth remained frozen, staring at the tactical display. This wasn't the human fleet he had expected. These ships, massive, angular, bristling with weapons that far outmatched anything the Council had, were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "How?" Gareth muttered, his voice barely audible. "Where did they get these ships?" Before he could process the thought, the first volley of human fire hit. The Council's defensive formations crumbled under the onslaught. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles slammed into their ships with devastating force. Shields buckled and broke, hulls split open, and entire warships exploded in brilliant fireballs, scattering debris across the battlefield. Gareth's flagship shook violently as several blasts struck its shields. He grabbed onto the edge of his command chair, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Admiral," one of his officers shouted, "we've lost 3 cruisers and a battleship. Their firepower it's off the charts." "Impossible," Gareth snarled, shaking off his shock. "This is impossible. No human fleet should be able to do this." But it was happening. The Council's fleet, one of the most powerful armadas ever assembled, was being torn apart by a force they had never anticipated. "Admiral, we need to fall back," another officer yelled. "We're losing ships too fast." Gareth hesitated. Falling back meant admitting defeat. It meant acknowledging that the humans had outmatched them. But as another explosion rocked the ship, he realized he had no choice. "Order the fleet to retreat," Gareth barked, his voice filled with fury. "Get us out of here before we're wiped out." But it was too late. As the Council's fleet began to fall back, humanity's ancient fleet pressed the attack. Captain Reese watched from the bridge of the Prometheus as the Council ships turned and fled, their once imposing armada now reduced to a disorganized rabble. "They're retreating," Torin reported, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "Not fast enough," Reese replied. "Target their engines. Make sure they don't escape." Across the fleet, human warships unleashed precision strikes at the fleeing Council vessels. Engines were blown apart, ships were disabled, and more of the Council's mighty warships were left dead in space. The few that managed to escape were badly damaged, limping away like wounded animals. Reese allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The Council's arrogance had cost them dearly. They had thought themselves invincible, untouchable, but now they had tasted humanity's wrath. And this was only the beginning. "Captain," Torin said, her voice cutting through his thoughts, "we've received a transmission from Earth. The President is requesting an update on our status." "Patch her through," Reese ordered. Moments later, President Eleanor Moore's image appeared on the main view screen. She looked calm and composed, though there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Captain Reese," she said, her voice steady, "what's the status of the battle?" "We've broken the Council's fleet, Madam President," Reese reported. "They've been forced to retreat. Their losses are significant." Moore nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good. The Council must know that we will not be cowed. But this isn't over yet." "No, ma'am," Reese agreed. "This was just the opening salvo." Moore's gaze hardened. "Then we press the attack. We will not stop until the Council is brought to its knees." Reese inclined his head. "Understood, Madam President. We'll proceed to the next phase." The transmission ended, and Reese turned to Torin. "Send word to the fleet. We're moving to the Guyana system. Prepare for the next engagement." Torin nodded, relaying the orders to the fleet. The ships began to reposition themselves, setting course for the heart of the Council's territory. As the Prometheus powered up its engines and the fleet moved out, Reese couldn't help but think of the battles to come. The Council had struck the first blow, but humanity had responded with a vengeance. Now, they would take the fight to the Council's doorstep. And this time, there would be no mercy. On the Council's homeworld, panic was spreading. Reports of the fleet's defeat had reached the Council chambers, and the once confident councilors were now gripped with fear. High Commander Whiffle stood at the center of the chamber, his expression grim as the councilors shouted questions and accusations at him. "How could this happen?" one councilor demanded. "How could the humans have such power?" "We underestimated them," Whiffle admitted, his voice tight with frustration. "But we still have the advantage. We control the majority of the galaxy. We have resources the humans could only dream of." "But their fleet," another councilor began, only to be cut off by Whiffle's raised hand. "We will regroup," Whiffle said firmly. "We will not allow this defeat to break us. The humans will pay for their defiance. We will crush them, no matter what it takes." But even as he spoke, Whiffle couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Humanity was no longer the weak, insignificant species the Council had once thought them to be. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that had just unleashed its wrath upon the galaxy. And now, the Council would face the consequences. The galaxy trembles. The aftermath of the battle against the Council's fleet sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News of humanity's reemergence, coupled with the overwhelming power of Earth's ancient fleet, rippled through every star system, igniting fear and uncertainty in alien empires and governments. The galaxy had always believed humanity to be a species of the past, a fallen power, yet now they were back, more dangerous and vengeful than anyone had anticipated. On board the Prometheus, Captain Aaron Reese stood in his quarters, staring out at the stars. The battle was over, but the war had only just begun. Earth's wrath had been unleashed, and there would be no turning back. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Commander Lexatoran's voice came through the intercom. Captain, incoming transmission from the Centauri Coalition. High Chancellor Tyros requests an urgent conference. Reese's brow furrowed as he turned away from the viewport. The Centauri Coalition had always maintained a neutral stance, avoiding conflict with both the Council and humanity. But now things had changed. He tapped a button on his wrist console, signaling for the transmission to be patched through. Tyros's face appeared on the screen, an older Centauri, his pale blue skin creased with age and worry. His normally composed demeanor was absent, replaced by a hint of desperation. Captain Reese, Tyros greeted, his voice strained. I understand you are now leading Earth's fleet. We need to talk. Reese nodded. What's on your mind, Chancellor? Tyros hesitated, his long fingers fidgeting with the edge of his robe. You've made quite the statement, Captain. The galaxy is trembling. The Council is in disarray, and many of the smaller factions are terrified. They fear humanity's retribution will extend far beyond the Council. Reese's eyes narrowed. And what about you, Chancellor? Where does the Centauri Coalition stand? Tyros sighed. We have no desire to involve ourselves in this war, Captain. The Centauri have always been peacekeepers, mediators, but even we cannot ignore the potential consequences of Earth's return. The Council may be weakened, but they still command vast resources and influence. They won't go down without a fight. Is this a warning? Reese asked. Tyros shook his head quickly. No, Captain. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer a path forward, one that avoids dragging the entire galaxy into chaos. Reese folded his arms across his chest. I'm listening. Tyros leaned closer to the screen, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The Council's grip on power is slipping. There are factions within their ranks, disgruntled governors, ambitious military leaders, who are beginning to question their leadership. If you can exploit that division, you might be able to dismantle the Council from within. You wouldn't need to burn the galaxy to the ground. Reese considered the offer, his mind racing with possibilities. Tyros was right. If the Council's internal strife could be amplified, it might be possible to bring them to their knees without further bloodshed. But Reese also knew that Earth's fury was not easily quelled. The destruction of Athura had left a wound too deep to heal with diplomacy alone. I appreciate the offer, Chancellor, Reese said carefully, but humanity has suffered too much at the hands of the Council. We won't settle for half measures. Tyros' expression tightened. Captain, if you push too hard, you could ignite a galaxy-wide war that will spiral out of control. The Council may fall, but countless other species will rise to defend themselves if they feel threatened. Even Earth's fleet can't take on the entire galaxy. Reese's jaw clenched. We didn't ask for this war, Chancellor. The Council brought it to us. Tyros held Reese's gaze for a long moment, then sighed. I understand, Captain. Just remember that the actions you take now will shape the future of the galaxy for generations to come. Tread carefully. The transmission ended, and Reese stood in silence, contemplating Tyros's words. The galaxy was indeed trembling, but was it out of fear of the Council or fear of humanity's growing wrath? And how far was Earth willing to go in its quest for vengeance? Far away from the battlefield, on the fringes of the Council's territory, Admiral Greth stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, his face set in a grim expression. His defeat at the hands of the human fleet had not only cost him ships, but also his pride. He had never imagined that humanity would possess such power, and the humiliation of their victory weighed heavily on his shoulders. Around him, his surviving officers moved with haste, scrambling to regroup what remained of the Council's forces. Their fleet had been devastated, and morale was at an all-time low. A young officer approached, saluting sharply. Admiral, the Council has convened an emergency session. High Commander Ithal has requested your presence immediately. Greth nodded, dismissing the officer with a wave of his hand. As the door slid shut behind him, Greth steeled himself for the coming confrontation. He knew that Ithal would not be pleased with his failure, but the truth was that no one had anticipated humanity's resurgence. Arriving at the council chambers, Greth entered to find a room already abuzz with heated arguments and accusations. The councilors, representatives of dozens of alien species, were shouting over one another, their faces twisted in anger and fear. At the head of the room, High Commander Weithel stood, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the proceedings. Enough. Weithel's voice boomed, silencing the room. His eyes locked onto Gareth as the Admiral took his place among the other military leaders. Admiral Gareth, Weithel growled, you failed to contain the humans. You failed to defend the Council's interests. Gareth clenched his fists at his sides, but kept his voice calm. High Commander, the humans' fleet was unlike anything we've ever encountered. Their technology, their firepower, it far exceeded our expectations. Excuses, one of the councilors shouted from across the room. We trusted you to neutralize the human threat, and instead, you've allowed them to run rampant across our territory. Greth glared at the councilor, his temper flaring. If we had been properly informed of the humans' capabilities. Enough. Weithel cut him off with a sharp gesture. The blame does not matter now. What matters is how we respond. We cannot afford another defeat like this. The humans are emboldened, and the galaxy is watching. If we do not act swiftly, we risk losing control over everything we've built. What do you propose, High Commander? One of the military governors asked, her voice edged with doubt. The humans have already dealt us a severe blow. We need time to rebuild our forces. Eithel's gaze hardened. There is no time for rebuilding. We must strike back now, while we still have the advantage of numbers. I have already dispatched reinforcements to key systems in our territory. We will trap the humans and crush them before they can gain any more momentum. Reth frowned, his instincts telling him that this was a dangerous gamble. The Council's forces were depleted, and the humans were clearly far more formidable than anyone had anticipated. But he knew better than to openly challenge Weithel in front of the councilors. I will lead the counteroffensive myself, Weithel declared, his voice filled with conviction. The humans may have won a battle, but they will not win this war. As the council prepared for its next move, whispers of humanity's return spread like wildfire across the galaxy. In the far reaches of space, on planets and moons that had long remained neutral, governments and military leaders began to take stock of their own defenses. Civilizations that had once looked upon humanity as a relic of the past now regarded them with a mixture of awe and trepidation. In dark corners of the galaxy, pirate factions and warlords plotted how they might exploit the chaos to their advantage. Mercenary groups began offering their services to the highest bidder, eager to profit from the impending conflict. The galaxy was a powder keg, and humanity's rage was the spark that could ignite a firestorm. Back on Earth, President Eleanor Moore stood in the war room, surrounded by her top advisors and military leaders. The victory over the Council's fleet had been a significant step, but she knew the battle was far from over. Our next target must be strategic, she said, her voice calm but firm. We need to weaken the Council's hold on key systems without overextending ourselves. General Marcus Voss, head of Earth's military forces, nodded in agreement. The Council is likely regrouping as we speak. We should strike before they can amass another fleet. Take out their shipyards, disrupt their supply lines. Moore nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the next phase of the war. The galaxy was trembling, and now, more than ever, Earth needed to seize control of its destiny. This is our moment, she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. We will bring the Council to its knees. And in doing so, we will show the galaxy that humanity is not a species to be trifled with. The Council's desperate counterattack. The Council's grand chambers were a storm of chaos. High Commander Weithel presided over the debate, a steely determination etched into his features. The once proud and unified ruling body of the galaxy now sat fractured, their members arguing. Panicked whispers filling the room as they weighed their next steps against a foe they had long underestimated: humanity. The humans cannot be allowed to continue this rampage. Governor Velk hissed, his reptilian tail flicking nervously behind him. They've already decimated our fleets. If we don't strike back now, they'll pick us apart system by system. Counselor Eldara, a diplomat from the Avenish people, slammed her hand on the table. Strike back? With what? Our forces are in disarray. We need to negotiate. Negotiate? Ithal spat the word, his voice dripping with disdain. They won't negotiate. They want vengeance. They want retribution for what we did to their home. No, we must stand united and crush them before they gain any more momentum. Silence fell over the chamber as the counselors weighed their options. The loss of their fleet had sent shockwaves throughout their vast network of allies and colonies. The Council had been the dominant power in the galaxy for millennia, but now, for the first time, their supremacy was in jeopardy. Ithal, seeing the fear and indecision in their eyes, leaned forward, his voice low but forceful. The humans are formidable, but they are not invincible. They are still outnumbered. Their ancient fleet, powerful as it may be, is still only a fraction of what we command. He activated a holographic display, projecting a map of the galaxy and its key systems. Our intelligence indicates that their fleet is currently resupplying near the abandoned Arcanus system. If we strike there swiftly, we can catch them off guard. It's a choke point. If we can overwhelm them, we can deliver a decisive blow. Counselor Eldara frowned. And if we fail, we'll lose more ships and further embolden them. Ithal's eyes burned with fierce conviction. Failure is not an option. If we do nothing, we lose everything. This is our only chance to stop them before they become an unstoppable force. The chamber fell silent once again, each counselor considering the High Commander's words. The stakes were clear. This counterattack could either halt humanity's advance or spell the beginning of the end for the Council. After what felt like an eternity, Governor Velk spoke up. I support the plan. We must act. For the sake of the galaxy. One by one, the counselors voiced their agreement, and the decision was made. The Council would launch a desperate counterattack, throwing everything they had at the humans in a last-ditch effort to regain control of the situation. In the cold depths of space, the Earth fleet was preparing for their next offensive. Captain Aaron Reese stood aboard the Prometheus, watching as the crews worked diligently to repair and resupply their ships. The Arcanus system had provided a temporary refuge, its abandoned stations and mining outposts now serving as makeshift repair yards for Earth's warships. Commander Lexa Torin approached, her expression serious. Captain, we've received reports of unusual movement from the Council's remaining fleets. It looks like they're amassing near the Zelkor system. Intelligence suggests they're planning a counterattack. Reese nodded, unsurprised. They're desperate. They know we've got the upper hand now, and they'll do whatever it takes to stop us. Lexa hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Aaron, they still outnumber us significantly. Even with the firepower we've brought to bear, we can't afford to underestimate them. If they catch us off guard. They won't, Reese said, his voice firm. We'll be ready for them. We knew this wouldn't be an easy fight. Lexa nodded, her confidence returning. Then let's make sure they regret it. As they spoke, General Marcus Voss entered the command deck, his eyes sharp and focused. Captain, we need to talk strategy. If the Council is planning a counterattack, they'll come at us with everything they've got. We need to hit them hard and fast before they can organize. Reese turned to the tactical display, his mind racing with possibilities. What's our best option? Voss stepped forward, bringing up a series of strategic points on the map. We have a few choices. We can fortify our position here and wait for them to come to us, using the terrain to our advantage. Or we could strike first, launch a preemptive attack on their staging area before they have a chance to gather their full strength. Reese studied the map carefully. Both options had their risks. Fortifying their position would give them a defensive advantage, but it could also give the Council time to amass a larger force. Striking first, on the other hand, would allow them to dictate the terms of the engagement, but it also meant facing the Council head-on without knowing the full extent of their forces. After a moment of consideration, Reese made his decision. We strike first. We can't afford to let them build up their strength. If we hit them now, we can catch them off balance and keep the pressure on. Voss nodded approvingly. Agreed. We'll organize the fleet and prepare for the assault. I'll have our forward scouts gather more intel on their staging area. Reese turned to Lexa. Prepare the crew. We move out within the hour. As the preparations were made, the atmosphere aboard the Prometheus was tense but focused. The crew knew what was at stake. This battle could determine the fate of Earth and the galaxy. Meanwhile, on the Council's flagship, High Commander Weethel stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the starry expanse before him. The Council's fleet, though diminished, was still a formidable force. Hundreds of warships, bristling with weaponry, were now assembled in the Zelkor system, ready to strike. Admiral Gareth, Weethel said, addressing the seasoned commander who had once been humiliated by the humans, you will lead the vanguard of our assault. Redeem yourself in the eyes of the Council. Gareth, his pride still wounded, but his resolve unbroken, nodded curtly. I will not fail again, High Commander. The fleet began its final preparations for the counterattack. Weapon systems were brought online. Shields were powered up, and the engines hummed with energy. The time for talk was over. Now it was time for action. As the Council's fleet advanced toward the Arcanus system, Weethel allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. This time, they would crush the humans and reassert the Council's dominance over the galaxy. But deep in his heart, a seed of doubt lingered. He had seen the reports of Earth's ancient fleet, ships that seemed to defy the very laws of physics with their advanced technology and overwhelming firepower. If the Council failed again, it could mean the end of everything they had built. Still, Weethel pushed the doubt aside. They had no choice but to win. Failure was not an option. In the Arcanus system, Captain Reese stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching as the stars shifted around them. The fleet was ready, the crew was prepared, and the plan was in motion. As they moved out to meet the Council's forces head-on, Reese felt a surge of anticipation. The Council thought they could crush humanity once and for all, but they were wrong. Earth's fury had only begun to burn, and the galaxy would tremble beneath its flames. As the ships of Earth's fleet emerged from the darkness of space, their engines flaring to life, Reese gave the order that would ignite the next great battle of the war. All ships, prepare for engagement, Reese commanded. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity is not to be trifled with. Let's give them a fight they'll never forget. The fleet surged forward, weapons primed and ready. The Council's forces were waiting for them, but humanity was no longer the fractured, vulnerable species they once were. The galaxy would soon learn that Earth's rage knew no bounds, and the fires of war would burn brighter than ever before. The end of an era. The battle had raged for hours across the void of space, filling the stars with flashes of light as warships exchanged fire in a deadly dance. Earth's ancient fleet, awakened from its long slumber, was engaged in a titanic struggle against the Council's desperate counterattack. Explosions rippled through the dark expanse, debris from both sides scattered across the battlefield. But the tide of war, once firmly in the Council's hands, had shifted decisively in humanity's favor. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Aaron Reese stood, watching the chaotic battle unfold. The ship shook violently as it absorbed another glancing hit from a Council warship. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and alarms blared throughout the ship, but Reese's expression remained stoic. He had been in battles before, but none like this. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was the culmination of humanity's vengeance. Status report. Reese barked as he steadied himself. Commander Lexa Torin, despite a deep gash on her forehead, wiped away the blood and responded crisply. "Shields are holding at 40%, Captain. We've lost 2 cruisers, but the fleet is holding the line. The Council's forces are weakening." Reese nodded grimly. "Good. Have the remaining cruisers focus on their flanks. We need to break their formation." General Marcus Voss, standing nearby with his arms crossed, surveyed the tactical display. His sharp eyes picked out the weakening points in the Council's defense. "Their center is starting to falter," he observed. "We need to punch through and deliver a final blow." Reese's gaze followed Voss's analysis. He could see it too. The Council's once mighty fleet was beginning to crack. For all their numbers, they had underestimated the sheer determination and fury of humanity. "Let's finish this," Reese said, his voice filled with determination. "All ships converge on their flagship." Meanwhile, aboard the Council's flagship, High Commander Weifel watched in disbelief as his forces were slowly overwhelmed. His once massive fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants, desperately trying to hold the line. The humans, those insignificant beings he had dismissed as inferior, had decimated everything the Council had thrown at them. How could this happen? Eiffel muttered to himself, his hands gripping the edge of the command console. "We are the rulers of the galaxy. They are but a speck." But the reality was undeniable. Earth's ancient fleet, armed with weapons far beyond what the Council could have imagined, was tearing through their ships with brutal efficiency. The Council, once the dominant force in the galaxy, was now fighting for its very survival. Admiral Gareth, his pride long since shattered, approached Eiffel with grim news. "High Commander, we can't hold them off much longer. We've lost 70% of our fleet, and the human flagship is advancing on our position." Eiffel stared at the holographic display, watching as the Prometheus led the charge toward their beleaguered defenses. His mind raced for a solution, but there was none. They had been outmaneuvered, outgunned, and outthought at every turn. The humans had become a force of nature, unstoppable in their quest for vengeance. "We must retreat," Eiffel said quietly, though the words tasted bitter in his mouth. "Order all remaining ships to fall back to the inner systems. We need to regroup and—" He was cut off by a sudden explosion that rocked the entire ship. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered as damage. Reports flooded in. One of the Council's secondary command ships had been destroyed by a direct hit from a human dreadnought. The debris of the massive vessel floated through space, a silent testament to the Council's crumbling power. Eiffel's heart sank as he realized that there would be no retreat. There was no regrouping, no second chance. The era of the Galactic Council was ending, and nothing he could do would stop it. The Prometheus surged forward, leading the final assault on the Council's flagship. Earth's fleet, having destroyed most of the enemy's warships, now focused all of its firepower on the center of the Council's command structure. Energy beams and missile salvos streaked through the void, slamming into the Council's remaining defenses with devastating precision. Inside the flagship, Eiffel braced himself against the console as another explosion tore through the hull. The ship's systems were failing and fires raged throughout the corridors. Desperation clung to the air as the crew scrambled to maintain control, but it was clear to all on board that the end was near. "High Commander," Gareth said urgently, "we must abandon ship. We can still escape." Eiffel shook his head, a deep sadness settling over him. "There is nowhere left to run. Admiral, even if we survive today, humanity will hunt us down. They will not stop until the Council is nothing but a memory." Gareth opened his mouth to protest, but a final, massive explosion cut him off. The floor beneath them buckled as the flagship's reactor went critical. Eiffel closed his eyes, accepting his fate as the ship disintegrated around him, consumed by the fire of Earth's wrath. On board the Prometheus, the crew watched as the Council's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, signaling the end of the battle. A cheer went up throughout the ship as the realization of their victory set in. The Council's leadership was gone, their fleet shattered, and their hold on the galaxy broken. Captain Reese allowed himself a small smile as he watched the remnants of the Council's forces retreat into the distance. The war was over, or at least, this battle was. But Reese knew that the galaxy had been forever changed by the events of this conflict. "We did it," Lexa said quietly, standing beside him. She looked exhausted but relieved. "The Council's reign is over." Reese nodded, though his expression remained somber. "We've won, but the galaxy will be in chaos now. Without the Council, there will be power struggles, instability, maybe even worse wars to come." General Voss approached, his voice steady. "We'll deal with that when the time comes. For now, we've secured humanity's future. That's what matters." Reese looked out at the stars, his mind filled with the weight of everything they had accomplished. The ancient fleet had been reawakened to defend Earth's honor, and in doing so, they had reshaped the very fabric of the galaxy. Humanity, once seen as a minor player on the galactic stage, had now proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. "The galaxy will never forget what we've done here," Reese said softly. "But we must be careful not to become what we fought against." Voss nodded. "We fight to protect, not to conquer. We'll rebuild, but we won't repeat the Council's mistakes." As the fleet began to regroup, repairing their ships and tending to the wounded, the reality of their victory settled in. Earth's wrath had been unleashed upon the galaxy, and the Galactic Council had paid the price for their arrogance and cruelty. An era had ended, but a new one was beginning, a future in which humanity would play a pivotal role. But for now, there was a moment of peace. The fires of war had burned hot, but they had not consumed humanity. Instead, they had forged a new path, one that would shape the destiny of the galaxy for generations to come. Captain Reese looked toward the stars, his mind already turning to the challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast, and while the Council's reign had ended, new threats would undoubtedly arise. But this time, humanity would be ready. "We move forward," Reese said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "The galaxy is ours to protect now. Let's make sure we're worthy of it." And with that, the fleet set its course, leaving behind the ashes of the old era as they embarked on a new journey, a future where Earth's strength and resolve would guide the galaxy toward a brighter tomorrow.